Imagine a physical gesture that is so ancient it actually predates the invention of writing.
Right, something universally understood.
Exactly. Like it spontaneously appears across completely disconnected cultures. We're talking from ancient Egypt all the way to medieval Ireland.
Yeah, which is incredible.
It really is. And it's a gesture so intensely powerful that it successfully shut down a major corporate oil terminal in the 21st century, like halting 500,000 barrels of oil a day.
That is a staggering amount of power.
Truly. So, our source material today for you listening is this incredibly compelling essay. It's titled Anasyrma, The Somatic Power of the Primal Feminine. And the mission of this deep dive is to explore this forgotten visceral power of the human body.
Because we're really unpacking how the physical form isn't just, an object to be looked at.
Right. It's a literal force of nature that can bypass the rational mind completely. So, to start, we really need to define the word at the center of all this. What exactly is anasyrma?
So the term itself comes from ancient Greek. Ana meaning upward, and syrma meaning skirt.
Okay, so literally lifting the skirt.
Right. On a purely literal level, it's the act of a woman lifting her skirts to expose her genitalia. But, and this is crucial, before we get into the historical record, we have to strip away the modern lens we usually apply to something like this.
Because modern people bring a lot of baggage to that visual. Right?
Oh, absolutely. If a modern person hears about this, they almost automatically categorize it in one of two ways. Like, they think it must be an act of sexual seduction or a gesture of extreme vulnerability and surrender.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But anasyrma is neither of those things. It is an absolute assertion of power. It is confrontation.
Well, to understand how an exposure like that functions as a confrontation rather than, a vulnerability, we have to look at the psychological mechanism the essay described.
Right, the somatic logic.
Yeah, exactly. But I have to admit, somatic logic sounds a bit mystical on a first read. What does that actually mean in practice? Like, how does the body just bypass the brain?
Let's break down the neurology and psychology of it. So, somatic basically refers to the living body as it is experienced from within. It's the body's intrinsic biological intelligence.
Okay.
Now, human conflict is almost always mediated through the brain's higher processing centers. We use words to debate, we use symbols, we wave flags, we point weapons.
All the standard tools of conflict.
Right, and all of those require the prefrontal cortex to interpret a threat and calculate a response. But when a woman performs anasyrma, she introduces a completely different category of reality into the conflict. It short-circuits that higher processing.
Because the brain is expecting a conventional attack
Right.
or a defense, and instead it just gets hit with the absolute origin of life.
Precisely. It creates this profound cognitive dissonance. The brain just doesn't have a pre-programmed combat response for the biological threshold through which every single human being entered existence.
It's just too fundamental to argue with.
Exactly. You can debate an ideology, or you can physically fight back against a weapon. But you cannot argue with the literal threshold of life and death. The viewer is forced into a somatic freeze.
Wow. So the body itself is deployed as the primary instrument of authority, demanding immediate recognition.
Yes.
It functions like an undeniable biological override switch. Like, usually if someone crosses a line, we argue, we negotiate.
Or we fight.
Right. But this exposure doesn't ask for acknowledgement. It just commands it. It flips the switch and shuts down the aggression because the person looking is suddenly confronted with the unarguable fact of their own origin.
And that biological reality is exactly why this gesture functions apotropically.
Apotropaically. Okay, explain that word for us.
Apotropaic is just a term for something that has the power to ward off evil, to disrupt malicious forces or repel darkness.
Got it.
Because anasyrma presents the ultimate, unadorned ground of reality, it acts as a protective shield. Malice or threat simply cannot penetrate the source of life itself. The sheer somatic shock is the entire mechanism.
Because it halts the momentum of violence by forcing a hard reset on the nervous system.
Exactly.
Well, if this biological override switch is truly hardwired into the human experience, it shouldn't be confined to just one specific era or one culture. We should see it popping up everywhere.
Oh, and we do.
Yeah, looking at the historical record the essay provides, the geographical footprint of this is staggering.
We are looking at a documented history that spans at least 4,000 years. And what is vital to understand is that it crosses these geographic and cultural lines with no evidence of a shared origin point.
Wow. So it wasn't just passed from one group to another.
Right. That tells us we are dealing with something foundational to the human species, not just some cultural fad. Some of the earliest recorded instances are in ancient Egypt.
Right, associated with goddesses like Hathor.
Yes, where the ritual exposure of the feminine body was deeply connected to protective force and divine power. But the formalization of the term and its deepest mythological roots really take shape in ancient Greece.
Specifically with the goddess Baubo, right?
Yeah.
Who's also known as Iambe.
That's the one.
Now, I really struggled with the Baubo myth in the reading. I kind of need to push back on this because the mechanics of it seem absurd to a modern mind.
Oh, it definitely sounds wild today.
Right, because the myth sets up this cosmic tragedy. The goddess Demeter, who controls the harvest, has her daughter Persephone abducted into the underworld. Demeter is clinically divinely depressed.
The earth is freezing, crops are dying.
Humanity is literally starving. And then Balbo, this crone figure, waddles up, lifts her skirt, flashes the grieving goddess, and makes her laugh. And this somehow cures the divine depression and saves the world.
Yeah, I know.
Biologically, psychologically, how does flashing a grieving mother fix the global harvest?
It sounds like a bizarre punchline if you try to process it logically.
Hmm.
But apply the somatic logic we just discussed. Think about what severe depression or grief does to the body.
It's like a shutdown.
Exactly. It is a state of profound stasis. The nervous system shuts down. Demeter is trapped in the ultimate freeze response of death and mourning. Words won't reach her. A comforting hug won't reach her.
So Balbo doesn't try to negotiate with Demeter's grief.
No, by performing Anasyrma, she delivers a massive somatic shock to Demeter's nervous system.
Ah, it's a defibrillator.
That is a perfect way to look at it. The exposure cuts straight through the cognitive layers of divine despair. It forces Demeter's body to recognize the primal, ongoing movement of life and emergence.
So the laugh isn't because it's a polite joke.
Not at all. The laugh is the physical release of that frozen energy. In this mythological framework, Anasyrma is quite literally the medicine that restarts the heart of the world.
It breaks the stasis, wow. And the text points out that this wasn't just abstract mythology for the Greeks and Romans. It was considered a practical tool for dealing with the physical world. Pliny the Elder cataloged this, didn't he?
He did. Pliny the Elder was meticulously documenting the natural world and the beliefs of human societies, and he recorded widespread accounts that this specific kind of exposure could exert control over the environment.
The environment, like the weather.
Yes. He documented claims from North Africa that the gesture could turn away charging lions and reports from other regions that it could deter bears. He even recorded the belief that it could calm whirlwinds and turn back hailstorms.
Wait, really? People believed the somatic shock worked on weather patterns and apex predators, not just human brains?
Whether or not a hailstorm actually stopped, the critical takeaway for us is the sheer scale of the belief. Across the ancient world, people fundamentally understood the female biological threshold as a force so potent it could command the elements.
That is wild. And we see this etched permanently into architecture, too. In Ireland and Scotland with the Sheela na gigs.
Yes, those are incredible examples.
I spent a lot of time looking at images of Sheela na gigs after reading the source. They are fascinating and, honestly, genuinely unsettling.
They definitely grab your attention.
Yeah, for you listening who haven't seen one, they are these stone carvings of fierce, often wide-eyed, skeletal-looking women, and they are using both hands to explicitly hold their vulvas open.
Very unapologetic.
Extremely. And these aren't hidden away in dark corners. They are placed right over the doorways and thresholds of castles and medieval churches.
Because their placement is the key to their function. The Sheela na gig is apotropaic architecture.
Right, there's that word again.
She's a gargoyle, but operating on a much deeper frequency than like a carved dragon or a winged monster. A monster tries to scare evil away with teeth and claws, which are the tools of violence.
But the Sheela na gig repels malice through the primal truth of the body.
Exactly. Her gaze is confronting. She is the ultimate bouncer at the door of the sacred space, forcing anyone who enters to cross the boundary of life itself.
And what's incredibly telling is how later generations reacted to them. The source material hints at this, but historically, 18th and 19th century Victorian clergymen were absolutely terrified by these carvings.
Oh, they couldn't handle the somatic shock.
Not at all. They would physically chisel them off the church walls or bury them in the graveyards. Because the raw, unadorned power of the female body simply existing as a boundary was just too threatening to their structured patriarchal worldview.
They desperately tried to erase the override switch.
Yeah. But the cultural memory was incredibly resilient, wasn't it?
Very. Even centuries into the Christianization of Europe, the logic held. Consider the 1764 artwork, the essay highlights from France, Jean de La Fontaine's The Devil of Pope Fig Island.
Oh, right, the one with the demon.
Yes, it depicts a peasant woman lifting her skirts, performing Anasyrma, and a literal supernatural demon is recoiling in absolute terror.
Wow.
The demon recognizes the threshold. The visual hierarchy of the art is clear. The peasant woman's physical body is a vastly superior force to a supernatural creature of darkness.
This history is mesmerizing, but I can imagine someone listening and thinking, sure, this is a great breakdown of ancient mythology and medieval gargoyles and art. It's a fascinating quirk of history.
Right, like it's safely in the past.
Exactly. But what happens when this exact thousands of years old logic collides with modern, multi-billion-dollar corporate power? Because it hasn't disappeared.
No, it hasn't. To see this in action, we have to look at an astonishing historical event from July and August 2002 at a Chevron Texaco oil terminal in the Niger Delta.
Now, before we get into it, I just want to make it clear to you listening, we are not taking sides here regarding corporate interests or local politics.
Right.
Our deep dive is strictly examining the tactics documented in the source material as a factual event.
Absolutely. We're looking purely at the tactics.
Yeah.
And the scale of this event is staggering. Over 600 women from the surrounding communities marched on the Escravos oil terminal and completely occupied the facility.
Just bringing operations to a dead halt.
Right. This was a terminal producing roughly 500,000 barrels of oil every single day.
Yeah.
And these 600 women were entirely unarmed. No firearms, no explosives, no barricade equipment.
They held a multi-billion-dollar piece of infrastructure hostage, and their spokesperson articulated their strategy with devastating precision. She told the press, "Our weapon is our nakedness."
The word weapon there is used with incredible intent. This was not some spontaneous protest that got out of hand.
Right.
It was the deliberate, strategic deployment of a cultural logic that has operated in West Africa for millennia. In many of those regional traditions, the public exposure of the mothers and grandmothers of the community is the ultimate sanction.
But why did it work so effectively on the men running the terminal and the security forces? Like, why didn't they just call in riot police to clear an unarmed crowd?
Because the somatic logic was cultural legible to everyone involved.
Yeah.
In that context, to force women to that point and to look upon the origin of life mobilized in anger is considered a profound, irrevocable curse.
It brings social and spiritual death.
Exactly. It is the community drawing the ultimate boundary line. The corporate executives, the local staff, and the military forces understood that if they pushed the women to actually execute Anasyrma, the men would be fundamentally severed from the social fabric.
They were paralyzed by a force vastly larger than state authority.
Or corporate mandates, yeah.
It is the biological override switch deployed at an industrial scale. I mean, you can fire tear gas at a picket line. You can arrest people holding signs. But when 600 grandmothers draw the physical threshold of human existence in the sand, the brain and the culture just short-circuit.
And it resulted in actual concessions. They won agreements for local jobs and community investments.
A millennial-old somatic gesture brought a 21st century oil conglomerate to the negotiating table. That is incredible.
It proves that Anasyrma isn't merely a symbolic theory of power. When enacted, it is the power itself. It doesn't argue for the authority of the body. It physically manifests it.
Which forces a really difficult question, I think. If this somatic shock is so undeniably potent, if it can ward off demons in art, cure divine depression in myth, and halt 500,000 barrels of oil a day in reality, why isn't this the foundation of how we view the body in the West today?
That is the million-dollar question.
Yeah, a power that effective doesn't just evaporate. It feels like Western society, which has historically been obsessed with managing and legislating the female body, must have actively found a way to neutralize this. Like, they clearly didn't want Sheila Nagigs staring down at them from every doorway.
You're touching on the exact mechanism of cultural control. The truth of the body was too foundational to entirely erase, but its raw physical manifestation was deemed far too potent and unacceptable for the highly controlled structures of later Western societies.
So what did they do?
The power wasn't destroyed, it was sublimated. It was translated into a more polite language that replaced visceral biology with abstract mathematics.
Sublimated into geometry. I have to say, the visual connection the essay makes here is mind-bending. Explain how they did this.
Well, we have to look at a shape called the mandorla, which is also known as the Zika Pisces.
Okay.
It is that pointed, almond-shaped frame you see everywhere in classical Christian art. Mathematically, it is simply the shape created by the intersection of two overlapping circles. but visually and geometrically, it produces the exact outline of the human vulva.
So it's the biological portal abstracted into a math equation.
Exactly. When medieval and Renaissance artists needed a frame to depict Christ in majesty, or the Virgin Mary, or the descent of the Holy Spirit, they didn't just use a circle or a square.
They inherently understood that to depict divine emergence, they had to use the geometry of the threshold.
Yes, the visual logic of the Shilanagic, the guardian of the portal, was seamlessly encoded into the mandorla. They kept the structural truth of the portal completely intact, but they scrubbed the flesh away so the viewer wouldn't have to confront the actual somatic source of that power.
Wow. They took the primal physical truth of Anasyrma, turned it into a couple of intersecting circles, and made it safe for the stained glass window. Which ties perfectly into the final major concept the essay brings up, the dark feminine. Now, I want to be careful to define this because in modern colloquial English, when we hear dark, we almost universally equate it with evil or malicious.
Right, and the source text makes a sharp and vital distinction here. In the context of the primal feminine, dark does not mean malevolent. It means sovereign. It means that which exists prior to domestication.
It's like the wilderness before the garden is planted.
That's a perfect analogy. For centuries, cultural narratives have tried to narrow the definition of the feminine, restricting it to concepts like receptivity, softness, nurturing, or aesthetic beauty. The dark feminine rejects that containment.
It encompasses the entirety of the natural cycle.
Yes, it is the capacity for destruction just as much as creation. It is the freezing violence of winter, just as much as the warmth of spring.
The essay points to figures that embody this perfectly, like the Celtic storm crone, the Caig who literally shapes the mountains with a hammer and controls the winter storms, or Kali in the Hindu tradition, or Hecate or Babo.
And notice, none of those figures are attempting to be visually pleasing. They don't seek permission, and they certainly don't seek approval. They just exist as the unyielding ground of reality.
And Anasyrma is the most direct somatic expression of that dark feminine sovereignty. It bypasses aesthetics entirely. It bypasses respectability politics. It just collapses the entire societal structure that dictates how the feminine is supposed to present itself and goes straight to the undeniable biological source.
Exactly.
When we pull all these threads together, from the Egyptian rituals to the Greek myths, the medieval stone carvers, and the women in the Niger Delta, it reveals a really radical truth about how we perceive our physical selves.
A completely different paradigm.
Yeah. In our modern context, society largely trains us to treat the body as a problem to be solved. Like, the body is an object to be dieted, hidden, controlled, judged, or legislated. We view it from the outside in.
But Anasyrma collapses that entire architecture.
It reveals that the body is not the object. The body is the origin.
Right. Because once the body is reduced to an object, it can be commodified, debated, and defeated. But when you return the body to its status as the primal origin, it becomes a force of nature. It becomes an undeniable fact that halts debate.
And that is the profound shift in perspective we really want you to take away from this deep dive. The human body is not merely a fleshy vehicle you are dragging through life. It is the unyielding boundary between existence and non-existence.
Yes. The act of Anasyrma doesn't ask for power. It places the body at the threshold and says, here is the source of life. I am not afraid of you, and you already know why.
Such a powerful thought.
It really is. And I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to ponder long after this deep dive ends.
Let's hear it.
If the ultimate primal symbol of biological threshold and emergence was quietly sublimated into the sacred geometry of Mandorla, hidden in plain sight for centuries, what other ancient, unacceptable somatic truths are secretly shaping the architecture, symbols, and structures you walk past every single day without even realizing it?
Oh, wow. That is a staggering thought to end on. What else is hidden right in front of us? Well, thank you so much for joining us on this historical and somatic journey. We really appreciate you taking this deep dive with us, and we'll catch you next time.